Now we're going to go through some questions. The first comes from Stephen Spitz from Falls Church, the Lake Barcroft area. Stephen's question is, can you say there is progress when the surge, designed to create a political space, hasn't made any political progress? This is the bloodiest summer since the war began. Is this progress? Congressman Davis.
Well, I think I'll reserve judgment on what the military progress has been in the surge. The preliminary reports from the field seem to show there has been some stability, particularly in Anbar province, where we're working with some of the tribal leaders, and in Baghdad. But regardless of that, and we'll wait for General Petraeus to come back and other Codels, but the political progress has gone backwards. And as I said in my opening remark, this is ultimately a political decision that the Iraqis have to decide. And the question for us is, how long do you wait? We've been 4 years where we've been out front, where it's been our resources and our people, our soldiers have been up, and we've trained Iraqi police, the Iraqi army, and they still don't perform near the standards that they should be. It's mentioned that they had an election in Iraq, and in fact, they had a higher voter turnout in Iraq than we did in Virginia. Somebody looked at me and said, well, Davis, maybe they had better candidates. I don't know. But the reality is their elections are more like a census than they are a real election. You don't get the kind of, it's still very tribal, very religious oriented as you come forward. And so the political progress has actually gone backward over the last month. That's why you're seeing calls from both Republicans and Democrats coming back that Malaki's ought to go. The President has chosen the other tact of embracing him. I don't know if he's, by that, he's trying to give him some encouragement and prop him up. But at this point, with a dysfunctional Iraqi central government, where the Sunnis have gone and withdrawn from it, it makes the situation there to solve it militarily really insignificant. You've got some stability, but the Iraqis have so far been unable to capitalize on that politically. That's a huge problem for us as we move forward, and you've got to factor that in.
And, Congressman, real fast.
I couldn't agree more.
Talking about that, the Petraeus report that we're expecting in mid-September, I've read a few articles that will actually be filtered through the White House. Is there any truth to that?
I mean,
I read that in the LA
again,
Times.
I would assume, I don't know the answer to that. I just would assume that as it goes through the White House, will take it. But the key for and do what they, you know, but I'm sure that they will probably tweak it. But having said that, I think what's important is that General Petraeus and his leaders will be up before Congress under oath for one-on-one questions. And that is our job at that point, to ascertain what's going on, ask the hard questions, make sure we have an understanding, notwithstanding what the report says. So it will be, as he comes before Congress, before the key committees there, and the questions that we ask him as we move forward so that we can make appropriate determination. Whatever the report formally says, we'll have them up there under oath. And I mean, I have no reason to think he's not going to be honorable in answering that. We have had problems in the past with generals who have come up and taken the party line. But I think, I mean, I'm going to give General Petraeus the benefit of the doubt on that, and that'll be the procedure.
Yes, and it's important to note that General Petraeus has also predicted that it will take 9 to 10 years to implement a proper counterinsurgency plan. The next question comes from Harry Wiggins from Lake Ridge, Virginia. Given that there will be a civil war if we withdraw today or we withdraw 10 years from now, how do you justify the continued waste of American lives? Sir.
Well, I'm not sure that I buy the proposition that 10 years from now, what the situation will be over there. We may disagree on that. I think that the reality is.
Civil war, let them have theirs.
Well, let me answer the question. At least I'll answer it my perspective, and then you can have a follow-up question. The insurgency in Iraq, as was noted by earlier speakers, is more complex than just Sunni and Shia and Al-Qaeda. Let me just divide it into a few sectors to give you a basis. It's closer to almost an anarchy when you take a look at it, because when we came into the country, Saddam released 100,000 felons from Iraqi prisons. These are just bad actors. Every society has them. They're out for hire. They're subcontracting and carjackings and beheadings and bombings and everything else. A second group was the remnants of the Ba'ath Party. Remember, we did not come in from the north. We came in from the south. And a lot of the The Baathists and the loyalists to Saddam just took off their uniforms and disappeared into the indigenous population. They knew where the armaments were, and they were there to fight another day. There is no question that the administration and the military were not prepared for that. I do not think they factored that in, and that has been a huge part of the problems. In addition to that, now you have, as was noted, al-Qaeda coming in, and what I call the jihadists coming in. Some of them are not al-Qaeda. Some of them are Shia from Iran that have come in just to stir things up, to make sure that whatever happens, we're not successful in establishing a democratic Iraq. And finally, you have what Zarqawi talked about in his original memoirs, which we've known about from almost the beginning, and that was polarizing the Sunni and the Shia, blowing up mosques, pitting them against each other. And frankly, this is something that fell apart last year, that the administration and the military, it got out of hand. And that's the fourth element. So you have all of these different elements, not necessarily working in concert, not necessarily winning strategic battles, but basically putting the country into a state of anarchy if we were to leave today. And that's how I see the situation. 10 years from now, 3 years from now, I don't know the situation. But the ultimate question for us is, at what point do we have to step back and let the Iraqis do it? And are we in the way? Is because Americans are sitting there going door to door in Baghdad and the like, does this mean that they take a back seat? Does this help on the recruitment on the other side because we're viewed not intended as occupiers by some of the groups? And I think those are the fundamental issues that we got to address as a Congress that I'm not sure have been addressed.
You still didn't answer the question, Tom. You didn't answer the question. Let me take a slightly different tack. The President has recently used a number of analogies to describe the situation in Iraq. And I think actually the closest analogy is Lebanon. Lebanon is in a near perpetual state of conflict. And Israeli presence in Lebanon for a decade did nothing to resolve that other than kill Israelis in addition to the citizens of the country. An election, for all of the hope that we had in the recent election, did not resolve the crisis, and the people of Lebanon are still struggling to find their way through it. But what is clear, to me at least, is that outside intervention, whether it was Israeli or Syrian, did not resolve the internal conflicts within Lebanon, and the people of Lebanon are going to have to do that. I don't disagree with Congressman Davis that we don't know that the civil war will go on for 10 years or not. But I do believe, and I think he does and said so, that the Iraqis are going to have to resolve this for themselves. And that means without us. Without